All right, it is 4:01 and it's the second Thursday of the month, so that means it's time for Open Door at 4. So I see a couple eyeballs looking in. We'll give some others a chance to join in. Be sure to share this post. Those of you who are joining by recording, let others know what we're doing. We'll be doing this every second and fourth Thursday at 4 p.m. So welcome to my office. This is downstairs, the world headquarters, as it were, and really excited to offer another resource and give you guys a chance to ask some questions. So I've got a few questions today that we're going to tackle. We're not going to take a long time, but we're going to go through these questions one by one. And if this is something, as you are catching up maybe by the recording, or if you're joining us live, if this is something that you appreciate, something that's helpful, I just want to let you know that we do something similar every month in our membership site, Peaceworks University. Peaceworks University is our online membership site for people helpers, and it has a tremendous amount of resource and is a tremendous help. And every month in our private Facebook community, we go live and answer questions for an hour. And so if you appreciate what you're hearing, seeing, interacting with today and would like more, please consider joining Peaceworks University. You can find out more at chrismoles.org. And if there's any Peaceworks U members tuning in, you can let everybody know in the comments how great Peaceworks University is. And it is pretty awesome. It's been just one of my favorite things that I get to do. Okay, so a couple minutes in, a few people on the line. Let's go ahead and jump in to our questions today. Question 1 is worded like this: how do you get an abuser to see his need to change and his need for counseling? So that's a good question and probably needs to be caveated a good bit. So the question begins, how do you get an abuser? And I just want to push the pause button. One of the things that we teach in our Men of Peace groups, one of the things that we talk about in Peaceworks University, something that I'm constantly training and talking about, is we only have control over ourselves. That's a true statement, whether I'm working with middle school boys with basketball, or whether I'm helping a counseling student who's progressing in ministry, or if I'm addressing a man who is destructive. The reality is we only have control over our choices, and that's one of the things about being a person. And the heart, which is in that regard. And so I say that because this question is often worded, well, how do I do this? How do I get a person to see they need to change? And I say all that to say there's really no guarantee that this person that you love or this person that you want to help will respond. So I think that's probably, point number one, the key thing to keep in mind. And I often jokingly say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, but you can feed him crackers. Really, in intervention work, one of the things that we're doing is simply presenting truth and trying to do it in winsome ways. We're trying to present truth in such a way that men are enticed, that men are thirsty for a deeper, healthier, better relationship with Jesus, that in turn will lead to better, healthier relationships horizontally. And all that to say, you really don't have anything that's going to cause somebody. Now, some things that help, let me throw that out there. Some things that I have seen help or aid or contribute to men choosing to seek out help or counseling or transformation. Number one is consequences. I'm just not sure anything works as well as consequences. And that is a great motivator. Now, obviously, we don't have time to go into just teaching about what good, healthy boundaries look like, how to enforce them, how to maintain them. But I will say that men will sometimes reach out for help and commit to seeking help if that's a condition of a consequence. Now, the dilemma with that is, right, if the potential of the consequences being removed, they may only be going through the motions. And so we really have to make sure that we're making choices that are good for us. And so this would be something, if the question submitted by a victim or a survivor, absolutely institute boundaries, consequences, and so on. But just really be careful for you that the choice here is for you, your relationship with Christ, your health, your sanctification, your growth, not necessarily to cause your partner to do something, because there's just no real guarantee that they're going to change. But consequences do spur a lot of that on. Another thing that I think I've seen contribute other than consequences, and that can vary from boundaries to separation to divorce to church discipline to the involvement of the state, right? The sword or government intervention, protective orders, and so on. The other thing that I have seen is conviction, and I don't mean to laugh about that, but it is peculiar that we kind of forget the Holy Spirit and conviction is another motivator. And so certainly prayer is an initial work. And I would even encourage you, maybe if you're at that place where you're a little desperate, maybe you're frustrated with this individual's progress or whether or not they're going to seek help or change or transformation or counseling. You can't make them do any of that. But certainly you can pray about it. And you can even pray imprecatory prayers, asking God to intervene. And that is okay. In the meantime, as you're waiting, make sure you're taking steps to be safe, contacting individuals and people that can help you process whether you're safe and how you can maintain safety and sanity in the process. So how do you get an abusive person to change? You don't, but you can offer help, resources, institute consequences if you're in a place to do so, and pray that the Spirit convicts. Those are just some things off the top of my head. Someone asked me recently about when I answer questions. It was, how long do you prepare before you answer questions? Full disclosure, true confessions, Pastor Chris, I don't prepare. So I really don't. I just want to answer them as they come. So I'm just winging it. So I don't know if that makes you think less of me or more of me. So understand that even when I do respond, they're probably not complete answers. I'm just giving you some introductory stuff to maybe help. But that's the first thing that comes in my mind, are those brief responses. Number two, the second question that came in, and like I said, we're going to work through three. If you have any that you want to put in the comment box, we may get to them while we're live. But number two, what kinds of resources? The emojis just went nuts on my end of the screen. So I don't know if I said something good or frustrating, because there were quite a variety of emojis. All right. What kinds of resources, the second question, what kinds of resources do you use with men to help them see their behaviors are sinfully destructive? What a great question. So resources, sometimes there's some stuff that I do that I always do. So uniform things that I always do. For instance, in my book, The Heart of Domestic Abuse, Gospel Solutions for Men Who Use Control and Violence in the Home, one of the appendices is a behavior inventory. I always use that resource in my Men of Peace groups and in work that I do with churches. And I use that resource as just an introduction to the actions, the choices, the behavior in an attempt to gather data. So most men I work with do not fill that out completely, but they do give me something that helps me structure my next set of questions. And so the first is I do use inventories and assessments, such as the one in my book. But secondly, a resource I use frequently are questions. And so I am somewhat annoying with the questions. And so in a counseling, coaching type relationship, I'm very much the guy who's machine gun questions, right? One question after the other. And that is a helpful skill, I would say, to learn as you're drawing attention. And I learned this from a number of different sources, but someone that I give credit for the philosophy behind it is my friend Charlie. Charlie passed away a few years ago. He's in heaven now. And Charlie used to jokingly say, if you're honest, you don't have to have much of a memory, right? And you've heard that before, I'm sure. And so what I find in coaching relationships with abusive individuals, they are prone to manipulate, they're prone to deceive, and a lot of times guys want to give you just small portions and keep you at bay. Asking questions rapidly, following up immediately, being quick on your feet like that, I find that helps as a skill with guys, because I don't have to keep my story straight, right? But they do. And sometimes that rapid fire questioning, one right after the other, building on each other, obviously, can be good because you can gather a great deal of data. As far as moving on down the process, and I mean, we could spend a couple hours just talking about resources and strategies. If you want to know more about that, PeaceWorks University, again, is a great resource for that. And then the online course I'm currently teaching, the live course, is a good resource for that, because a lot of times I just give examples. But as you go on down through the process, comparing and contrasting is a resource that I use frequently, in particular with Jesus. And so within the Christian world, one of the things that you'll find is men who abuse, who claim to be believers, and maybe if you're watching today and that would fit you, this might be a helpful exercise for you. But men who claim to be believers who are committing acts of abuse will often use scripture such as Ephesians 5 and terms like headship and so on to justify their actions. And so I like to use scripture like Ephesians 5, Colossians 3, 1 Peter 3, to contrast their behavior with Jesus's behavior. And I'll just quickly give you an example. So in Ephesians 5, we're told that the husband's the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. And what some people will do is they will hear the word head and they will think, as I put it to the guys, they'll think kingdom of the world. And the kingdom of the world, interpreting the word head, means top down, CEO, president, king, the person on top who uses power over. But Jesus defines head completely differently, and headship is not about that. In fact, I think the word kephale, which is the Greek word for head there in Ephesians 5, I think actually it's also used to describe Jesus as the cornerstone. So it doesn't just mean the head or the front or the top. It can also mean the foundation or the support or the source. But beyond that, Jesus models headship to us in places like Matthew 20 and Mark 10, when he tells the disciples that they cannot lord power over. He actually forbids disciples from using power over. So we want to contrast that. If he's a power over person, then he's actually living inconsistent with Christian doctrine. And then Jesus models that in John when he washes the disciples' feet. And then, of course, Paul talks about that in Philippians 2, Jesus' humility and what we know to be the mind of Christ. So comparing and contrasting is a big help in that. And then another resource I use, just off the top of my head, Paul Tripp's desire to punishment model, from desire to punishment, is one that I've just found to be super helpful over the years. Just moving from the I want wanting things is good. You can want good things, but he says, when wants become expectations, when the language shifts from I want to I should, then that becomes a problem. And then that can quickly morph into needs, from desires, expectations to needs, right? I want, I should, I must. And now that entitlement begins to seep in and sink in and solidify, and it morphs from, I believe it's from needs to demands. So, I want, I should, I must, you should. The other person's now responsible to meet my demands. And then, of course, the final is you didn't, so therefore I, and that's punishment. And taking the guys on that trajectory using their admitted behavior, their admitted motives, their admitted impact can be helpful. So those are just a few things. Oh, one other one, real quick. Stuart Scott, in his book, I think it's The Exemplary Husband, and he also allowed me to use it in my book, The Heart of Domestic Abuse, 30 manifestations of pride and their biblical rationale. The 30 manifestations of pride, those are super helpful as far as reviewing as a resource. So there's a few that come to mind. All right, question number 3. Do abusive husbands need to be told in detail by their spouses what they've done wrong? That depends. In fact, it depends on a variety of for a variety of reasons. Let me try to unpack it. I think it depends because my experience is most of the time abusive people do not remember details as vividly as victims. Now that can be flip-flopped, all right? But just from experience, and here's what I think is happening. If you talk to folks who are have an expertise in trauma and complex trauma, I think it's the limbic region of your brain, but there's some aspect in which trauma captures details. And so it's much more likely that a victim will remember the collar of shirt he's wearing, the smells, the senses that are going on. They will process information at a much broad spectrum level than, say, a perpetrator would. And so a lot of times perpetrators don't know details. They don't recall details. Interestingly enough, most perpetrators I've worked with will be able to detail what they're feeling. The anger, the sadness, the fear, the despair, the frustration, they'll be able to articulate how they feel, and that will usually allow them or invite them or tempt them into playing the victim. And so sometimes these he said, she said games that sometimes church leaders will play, sometimes law enforcement will play, actually are somewhat counterproductive, because you will have a victim who's highly detailed and a perpetrator who's not so detailed as far as what happened. Now, the questioner goes on to say that that is not the case for them. She said that her husband tells her that she's not giving him enough detail. So my suspicion would be, in that case, to the questioner, and again, I don't know the case, my suspicion would be that enough will never be enough, that there'll never be enough information that you can give that will help him, because the demand for more detail, more than likely, and I don't know the case, I'm just assuming, more than likely is a great way to keep the wheels spinning and not reach a resolution. Does that make sense? That the idea here is, well, you need to give me more. You're not giving me enough information. I don't see it. Help me understand. And really, it's probably not about more clarity. It's probably about more control. Again, this is just speaking from a typical case that I might be working. And then what information does an abusive husband need? I think a lot of times abusive partners do need details as far as knowing what they've done. Here's what I mean by this. The Power and Control Wheel is a good resource for this. If you're familiar with the Duluth Abuse Intervention Project, the Power and Control Wheel lists several tactics in the hub, or not the hub, in the spokes of the wheel, the little pie pieces. And it is helpful to get victim information, if possible, to fill in the pieces, because most of the time an abusive partner is not going to identify what they've done wrong or be able to, or be willing to. That could be it too. A lot of guys are able, they're just not willing, or be willing to put the pieces of the pattern together. So to the questioner specific question, I would be skeptical personally that more detail is needed. And it might be helpful to process that with an advocate. If you have somebody, say the local domestic violence shelter or a support group, where you could freely and safely process that information so that other people could speak into that, seems like that might be a helpful way to get better, more clarity to your question. One question in the comments, Wayne asks, hey Wayne, how use? It kind of depends upon what you know. So let's assume that I'm aware of a situation and my pastor is not. I want to honor the victim in the case and respect and value her safety. So while I would like the pastor to know, I would probably want the victim's permission to disclose that, especially if she's trusted me with that information. I want to make sure that she's safe, because I would hate for the pastor to do an end round and end up informing her husband and put her in a dangerous situation. However, if you're just talking in general, I do have a resource that I will give everyone here. Free resource right now. Some of you are probably already aware of it. It's churchcares.com. And this is the book that goes along with it, Becoming a Church That Cares Well for the Abused. And churchcares.com, there you can find a full curriculum, video-based curriculum. I think it's 12 20-minute sessions that churches and church leaders can go through. It is completely free, funded by the Ethics and Religious Liberty Council and the Southern Baptist Convention and Lifeway resources. And that resource is online right now, totally free of charge, and that's a great way to introduce, and it could be something that you could share with the pastor to help inform them. And that's a general statement. Now, if you know there's a situation going on, then I certainly want to value victim safety as far as disclosing that. If you think that someone's life is at risk, or you think someone's immediate health is at risk, then you may want to contact someone to get some advice, like an advocate, like the pastor. My fear, and I hate to do this because I love pastors. I am a pastor. Pastor Sonny has joined us. He's on the line. So I'm a big fan of pastors, but I think we all, the in pastoral ministry, could tell you that we're typically ill-equipped for this. And so that's why it's important to continue education and training. So informing the pastor doesn't guarantee you get a good response. In fact, a lot of victims would probably chime in at this point and say, the odds are good you're going to get a poor response. So that's why things like Church Cares and educational environments, PeaceWorks University, and the work that I do, traveling, my friend Leslie, my friend Joy, the training work that we do is really essential to helping pastors and church leaders. Okay, so there you have it. Second Thursday of the month. It's 4 o'clock, open door at 4. We're going to do this every other week. I think this is a great opportunity. Let me remind you, if this is something that you are benefiting from, that we do this over at PeaceWorks University once a month for an entire hour, as well as having our private Facebook community and resource after resource after resource. We issue a weekly resource, 4 resources a month. I don't know of a single place that has that much content. And you can find out more about that over at chrismoles.org. Feel free to keep the conversation going in the chat and share this with your friends so that folks can see and find out, and maybe next time we'll have twice as many folks here at the office. Okay? You guys have a great rest of the day. Thank you.